All right. The representative from my home state in New York's 16th district, Congressman Jamaal Bowman is back on the program with us. Congressman Mike Leon, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with me again.
Of course, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you've been in the news a lot, my friend. And as somebody that used to live in that district, very proud of a lot of the stuff that you're doing. And I want to get into some of it here on this show because at the top, obviously, we've seen some recent mass shootings that have happened in Nashville, in Louisville, Kentucky. You had the exchange with Representative Massey on the House floor, and the argument that he was making about schools with teachers that have guns don't have school shootings, one of the stupidest arguments of all time I've ever heard. But I wanted to ask you specifically because we've seen this talking point on the right, specifically with respect to Senator Ted Cruz. Let's arm schools like we do with banks. And then a shooting happens at a bank. For our audience right now that's watching and listening to this, what do you feel Congress needs to do realistically that can help? At least it's not going to put an end to mass shootings, but what can we do actually in practice right now? Because you were yelling at Representative Massey to look at the data. It sounds like they're not looking at the data. We understand that they're not going to give up the money they're getting from the gun lobby. But what can Congress actually do to help the American people right now with this wave of school shootings, mass shootings?
Well, listen, we can do a lot. The reason why I said look at the data is because states that have more lax gun laws, like open carry laws, where you can go into a gun store with a driver's license from any state and purchase a gun, purchase an assault rifle, purchase as many guns as you want. States that have laws like that have higher incidents of gun violence. And that is not only related to mass shootings and murder, it's also related to suicide. So that's a fact. That is data driven. That's why I mentioned to Representative Massey, he needs to look at the data. What Congress needs to do and should do is a very few specific things. Number one, we need a ban on assault rifles. Now, before people say we cannot ban assault rifles, they will never let that happen. The Brady bill not too long ago had a ban on assault rifles in our country, and we saw a dramatic decrease in mass shootings when that happened. So banning assault rifles is possible. We need universal background checks. Now, what does that mean? Again, in certain states right now, I could go into any gun store with simply a license and purchase a gun. In New York State, that has very strong gun laws, you have to take a class, you have to send out an application. There is a thorough background check and review process that takes several weeks to sometimes more than several months. And then you go back to the gun store, and the gun store does its own background check. We need something like that in every state in our country. And Congress can pass a federal piece of legislation that does just that. Number three, we need national red flag laws. Red flag laws. So if someone is a danger to themselves or others, they can be reported and not be allowed to purchase a gun. Fourth, we need to close sale loopholes. So in many states, person-to-person sale does not have to be tracked, right? So that is a big problem. And also gun show loopholes are available where those also are not tracked. Big deal. Lastly, Congress needs to force the DOJ to enforce laws that are currently on the books. Very specifically, the majority of law enforcement agencies, actually 10,000 out of 17,000, do not track firearm crime, meaning they do not enter ballistic information into a internet server that is tracked in law enforcement. They do not do that. As a result, we do not have the majority of the data we need to stop gun trafficking, to stop straw purchases, and to hold store owners accountable for selling to gun traffickers. But the data we do have indicates who the gun traffickers are in certain states and which gun owners, gun stores are most egregious in selling to gun traffickers. We know that information now, but the DOJ hasn't acted to hold those people accountable. And so there's a lot we can do. We just have mostly Republicans in Congress who don't want to act on this issue because they are sacrificing the lives of children for the Second Amendment. And that's why we need to vote the right people in the office and vote these people who don't want to act on gun control out of office.
As a parent and somebody who worries about that in a open carry state like Florida, I agree with you on a lot of that because it's something that keeps me up at night as a parent of two little kids that are both in school. I wanted to shift gears real quick. Speaking of law and order, you've been very vocal about, and I was on an MSNBC panel recently talking about this, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and the recent ProPublica report about the money that he's potentially getting from Harlan Crow that he hasn't disclosed. You've been vocal on social media about calling for his resignation. Again, what is something realistically that could happen to Justice Thomas? There's only been one Supreme Court justice that's ever been impeached, and they were found acquitted in the Senate. So I'm curious if this happened on the opposite side of the aisle, the impropriety that's happening. I think a lot of Republicans will be calling for that Democrat to resign. What is something realistically that Congress should be doing about Justice Thomas and this relationship with Harlan Crow?
Well, if this was a Democratic justice, Republicans in the House would be moving to impeach them right now as we speak. So there's no doubt in my mind about that. Again, you mentioned realistically. Here's the thing. The American people need to trust its government. And right now, the American people do not trust the government. Throughout my lifetime, the American people rarely trusted the government. So right now, the government has to do the work to rebuild that trust. Part of rebuilding that trust is doing the right thing, whether at the end of the day you lose the fight or not. The American people need to see that we're fighting. In my argument with Representative Massey, we got calls from all over the country, hundreds of calls, emails, and text messages of people just thanking us for even fighting, for showing outrage. They felt connected. Finally, a member of Congress feels the way we feel about this issue. It's the same thing with Clarence Thomas. We need the public to call for his resignation. We need the public to contact senators, members of Congress, to push them to call for his resignation. And if he doesn't resign, we need to act on impeaching him. Now, if that is not Republicans while they are in control over the next couple of years, it needs to be Democrats when we take control back in 2024. I mean, he is no longer objective if he is taking gifts from big donors. He's no longer objective. He's no longer acting upon the Constitution. He's now interpreting it. And as you saw after the overturning of Roe v. Wade, in his opinion, he wrote that maybe it's time to go after same-sex marriage as well. So this is who he is. He is not representative of what that body is supposed to represent. He needs to be held accountable. But beyond that, we need ethics reform on the Supreme Court. We need to expand the Supreme Court. And we need overall democracy reform that includes the Supreme Court, the Senate, the House, and the Electoral College.
You know, I wanted to ask you about something that's kind of intertwines in my world as somebody whose day job works in product and technology. You've been very vocal about the House meetings with respect to TikTok and these influencers, and you met with a bunch of them, I know, recently. I come at it from a different standpoint because as somebody who's done privacy policies in terms of uses for big organizations that are still out there in the marketplace, data capture is serious, and a potential foreign government having that access is serious, but it's akin to what's happening with other social media platforms. I'm curious from your vantage point, like, what is it that some of these influencers that you met with told you? What is your message about not banning TikTok here in the States? And why do you feel that some of the concerns that other people on that committee that have levied about China, do those concerns apply to you as well? Or do you feel like there's a way to handle that maybe with this Project Texas and going forward with that?
So first of all, I am always concerned about safety, security, and what's happening with our data. I'm always concerned about this. And so I'm concerned about it as it relates to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and any social media platform. And I have been concerned about it for quite some time. And TikTok is a part of that conversation. My argument, first and foremost, was for us to have a comprehensive conversation about social media, safety, security, privacy, and what's happening with data brokers on the open market. so that while we're having that conversation, we could come up with the legislation we need to keep our data and us safe. That's the conversation we need to have. In terms of what I heard from the influencers, they have found a home on TikTok. They have found a community on TikTok. They have found their voices on TikTok in a way that they haven't found it on the other social media platforms. That's just plain and simple. They have been able to start and excel in their small businesses on TikTok. We have 150 million people using TikTok. And right now, it is obviously a major competitor to the other social media platforms, particularly the American ones. TikTok has created a community that the other platforms claim to try to do, but have not, because many of their funding apparatuses are rooted on advertising dollars that move based on engagement and how well certain things trend or move. So, as you know, things that could be lies and misinformation move very quickly on social media. Things related to hate or racism or sexism or abuse move quickly on social media. On the American platforms, that stuff is rewarded. On TikTok, it seems to be less so. And I say seems to be because we still have to gather more information. But what I do know is I have not received one congressional briefing on the issue of TikTok. I have not. And so what that tells me is the espionage or mind control that we're fear mongering around when it comes to TikTok doesn't exist. Because if it did, I would have received a briefing on it. We have yet to do so. So let's not scapegoat one company, because if we close that company tomorrow, our data can still be bought and sold on the open market by China and any other country because we don't have comprehensive legislation, which is exactly what we need.
Yeah, I'm so glad, by the way, you said espionage because it pivots into my next question about the former president of the United States. Classified documents. I've been talking to so many legal experts, former FBI agent in charge of espionage and espionage related crimes. You were recently down in Manhattan combating Marjorie Taylor Greene and the nonsense that happened there when former President Trump was indicted. I'm just curious on your takeaways about the case overall, because I know you've been very vocal about the way House GOP is treating the district attorney Alvin Bragg in that case. You saw the hearing that they had yesterday downtown in Manhattan, or whatever that was, if we want to call it a hearing. So I'm just curious, just overall takes about the indictment itself and all of the misinformation and disinformation that former President Trump and the House GOP are putting out there about the district attorney and his relationship and proprieties and things like that. What do you make of all of it?
Yeah, this is GOP performance and performative government. This is them being more focused on the theater and the theatrics than they are on actually governing for the country. So, Donald Trump's indictment is based on evidence. We'll let the evidence fall where it may, and we'll see if he is found guilty or innocent. That's the way the justice system is supposed to work. What the GOP is trying to do is they're trying to leverage their roles and their power to intimidate Alvin Bragg, the district attorney of Manhattan, and to change public perception in New York City to ensure that public perception favors Donald Trump, because he is their savior, he is their former president, and he right now is in the lead of being the Republican nominee for the presidency in 2024. So they are here to pander and to make sure that he knows that they are supporting him by coming not just to the arraignment, but also in terms of the hearing. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, I mean, she just needed to take her butt back to her district and do her job, take her butt back to Washington and do something about gun violence. Jim Jordan, who chairs the Judiciary Committee, he has some of the highest rates of gun violence in the country in his district, but he tried to paint New York City as an unsafe city. So it's all theater, it's all performance, it's all a fear for profit campaign. They want to stoke fear when it comes to the border. They want to stoke fear when it comes to the debt limit. They want to stoke fear when it comes to China, and fear when it comes to other areas, because they cannot win on the issues. They cannot win with their ideas.
So let's stay on that for a second, because I want to ask you right now, over the next, 12, 13 months, what is something that you are working hard on in your term in office right now? As we get into 2024, like what is something that maybe the American people, or even people in your district, who, as I was once upon a time a part of, like what are some things that you are working on right now that are top of mind, top of the agenda for Representative Bowman?
So we're going to continue to push the gun violence agenda, and we're going to continue to the ending gun violence agenda, and we're going to continue to organize both locally and across the country to put pressure on my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, in the House and the Senate, to pass transformational legislation as it deals with gun violence. And that involves, when I talk about organizing, that's phone calls, that's door knocking, that's social media, that's text messages, that's talking to some key people who have key networks. We are deeply engaged in those conversations and looking to move the needle. As part of that, in 2024, I believe there's 24, 26 Senate races that are up for election. So, we want to organize to make sure we get the right senators into the right seats. And so what's important there is we have to make sure that we understand and take a data-driven approach to every state and every county in every state, so that we can identify the gaps in terms of voter turnout, so that we can organize specifically in those counties to dramatically increase voter turnout, because these races are won and lost by a few hundred votes. So if everyone comes out, we can have a super majority or close to it in the Senate. And just so people understand, the Senate is not like the House. In the House, all you need is 218 votes, and you could pass legislation out of the House. If it's 218 to 217 or 218 to 216, 218 to 250, doesn't matter. 218 is the matching number. In the Senate, there's 100 senators. You need 60 votes to pass legislation because of something called the filibuster. The filibuster could be ended tomorrow if Democrats in the House got together and said, we want to end it, but unfortunately they have not said that. So now we need a supermajority. So we need 60 votes. But if we got more Democrats in there, let's say it got to 55, 56, we might be able to do something to end the filibuster and pass real legislation around reproductive rights, gun control, or voting rights. So this is about organizing, and this is about making sure every single person 18 and over is registered and votes. Because when everyone votes, we get the right people into office, and that's the ultimate goal.
All right. We got 1 minute left here. Knicks,
Okay.
game one. All right. As we're recording this, it's game two. Last time I had you on, they were on a 5-game winning streak, and then they lost that previous game, and I'm incredibly superstitious. But what is your prediction right now for Jalen Brunson, Randall, Josh Hart, and the Knicks against the Cavs and going forward in the rest of the playoffs?
So I think the Knicks are going to win the series, and they'll have a tough sledding in the second round, but I think they're going to win the series. Tonight, game two, I think the Cavs are going to take game two because they're at home, and they got to play for their lives. They don't want to go down 0-2. So I think the Cavs will get game two, but I think the Knicks will win the series. I'm going to say the Knicks will win in 6.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Home game two, game 6. Nobody can break down gun violence and what we should do about it. And then the Knicks regaining that home court advantage, like Representative Jamaal Bowman out of New York 16th District. I can't thank you enough for hopping on the podcast, as well as, as a Bronx kid, very proud of the work that you are doing right now in Congress. Continued success to you, sir. Stay safe.
Appreciate you. Peace and love, man.
Hey, thanks for watching the Can We Please Talk podcast. Whatever clip you just watched, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stick around for some more. Subscribe to the channel. My partner's over here smashing the button. Come on, do him a favor. So hit subscribe.